It was a lazy Sunday afternoon. I was arranging the books on my bookshelf. My good friend said that having my Stephen King books on different shelves was really triggering his OCD, so I thought I'd better try and help him out. And then I saw it. Something really, really concerning. I owned a copy of the Diary CEO book, and I owned it in hardback. You know, Diary of a CEO, the podcast hosted by Steven Bartlett. He was on Dragon's Den and did lots of other business stuff. Now he's got millions of subscribers on YouTube. Where had it come from? Had I bought this myself? Was this an unwanted gift? Why did I have it in hardback? I thought back to my favourite Barry's economics video.
Headphones, the Higgs boson, fiberglass.
No, not that bit.
That the podcast itself is actually doing the exact opposite of what it promises to do. Not only is it not helping you succeed, I think it's actively stopping you from succeeding. In fact, I go further. I think stopping you from succeeding is its actual business model.
I don't know, the Diary of a CEO book. Maybe Barry is wrong. Maybe Bartlett wants me to be successful. After all, the back of the book says, "These are the fundamental laws that will ensure excellence. These laws will work now or in 100 years from now. Will you get started?" It was then I knew that I had to do it. I would have to read the book, and then we could answer the question once and for all. Is Diary of a CEO trying to make me less successful? Before I've even opened the book, we come to our first problem, the cover. Steven Bartlett decided to run a competition for the design of the cover. He posted on Instagram that he was accepting designs. Whoever did the one that he liked the best, he would pay them £3,000 and their design would be used. What he didn't say was that everybody else would get nothing. So potentially a lot of people out there wasted time and effort on a design to not get picked and to not get paid. To me, that feels exploitative. I really hope that not too many people entered this competition. The winning design, it has a white background, the title is in black letters, they're in bold. I feel like not too much effort went into this design. I note though that Steven Bartlett's name is in gold letters, so maybe that's why it won. The word law. So throughout the book, Steven uses the word law. As someone that's got 2 degrees in psychology, I don't like the way that he's using the word law. It's not a word to use lightly. It needs to have rigorous scientific evidence behind it. When I think of the word law, I think of Newton's second law of motion, the first law of thermodynamics, Boyle's law. These are actual laws backed by science. A law needs to be universal across the whole of humanity. It needs to be as true of someone living in the UK, as someone living in the US, as someone living in Japan, as someone in a tribe, an uncontacted tribe in the Amazon rainforest. It needs to apply to all of us equally. If something can't achieve this very high standard, it's not a law. Steven says to validate the laws that he's come up with, these 33 laws, he's extensively surveyed people around the world. Sorry, Steven, but my confidence in your ability to conduct meaningful research is very, very low. It's nothing personal. I just don't think you have the background for it. If you said that you had funded research and researchers had gone out there with your backing, I believe it. But you said that you did it yourself. You've also said in the past that you were a student at Manchester Metropolitan University and you dropped out after a single lecture. Sorry, but that gives me really low confidence in your ability to carry out research. For me, the references section at the back of the book also made some very interesting reading. In some chapters, he has references like Dweck, Kahneman and Tversky, Obama. He has references like Haidt, Klein, Becker. So far so good, but then I see he has other references like Peter Thiel, the controversial billionaire. In 2025, it was reported that he was giving speeches off the record about the Antichrist. Oops, not that one, this one. It was revealed that Peter Thiel was giving lectures on the Antichrist. So I feel like I can't really trust this kind of reference. And then in other chapters, his references include videos that Steven Bartlett published himself on his own YouTube channel. Yikes. Do you really think that your own videos make for reliable sources for this kind of book? Do you think that your own videos are at the same level as literal Nobel Prize winners? All right, so by this point, I've done everything possible to not read the book. I better start reading the book. I'm not going to go through it sentence by sentence. I'm not going to pick up on every ridiculous point that he makes. I'm going to try and do my best to just make one point for each of the 33 chapters, or each of the 33 laws that he says exist. All right, here we go. The introduction. Okay, I know. This is not one of the laws. This is an extra section. So this is an extra point. But there are multiple quotes in this chapter that really made me raise an eyebrow. The one that made my brain feel like it wanted to melt was, I believe most books are longer than they need to be. This feels like such a lazy generalization. Steven, mate, you haven't read most books. Therefore, you can't say whether they're too long or not. You really need to have some kind of nuance here. Something like, I believe most of the books I looked at while I was researching this book were too long. I believe that most books written by Stephen King are too long. I mean, Under the Dome, yeah, you'd be correct in my opinion, but not most of them. Even something like, I believe most books written in the self-help genre are too long. That would be acceptable, at least. But most books in the world? I mean, come on, there are hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of books that are published every year. It is impossible to pass judgment on all of them. So most books in the world are longer than they need to be. Dude, like this is GCSE levels of critical thinking. Was this book Vanity published? Oh, it was published by Penguin Random House. What the ever-loving... Law 1. Fill your buckets in the right order. The first law begins with an anecdote of his friend enjoying an espresso in the garden. As he's there enjoying the sunshine, sipping his espresso, a really out of breath and out of shape man comes up to him. He's sweating, he's out of breath. They chat for a little before the man jogs away. That man turns out to be Elon Musk. Bartlett eulogizes about how great Elon Musk is and says that he's filled his 5 buckets. That's why he's so successful. So people would do anything for him. The buckets supposedly are things like your skills and the people that you know and your reputation. If people think that Elon Musk might offer them a job, they'll quit their existing one, they'll move halfway around the world just for the opportunity to work with him. If Elmo is going to release a new product, they will pre-order it before it even exists. It's because he's filled his 5 buckets to the brim. I'm sorry to break it to you, Steven, mate, but I think it's because Elon is literally a billionaire. People want to get a piece of the action. It's got nothing to do with these buckets. Maybe I'm going out on a limb here, but maybe the reason that Elon is so successful and has so much money now is that his dad was a millionaire. Or maybe it's the buckets. So at this point in the book, my early thoughts are that this book is like Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Rich Dad, Poor Dad is this really unhinged mess of a book, which somehow has rave reviews everywhere. Like that book, Steven's book is full of suspicious anecdotes that feel made up. Almost all of them paint Steven in the best possible light. Whenever in the book someone does something different to whatever Steven advises, then it all goes wrong for them. And if only they'd listened, if only they did what Steven suggested that they would do, then it would turn out all right. Early on in particular, there's a story about a young guy that's working in Steven's company. The guy comes and speaks to Steven and tells him, "Oh, I've been offered this opportunity to be a CEO in New York. You know, that's what I've always wanted. I've always dreamed of being a CEO and living in a city like New York." If he became CEO of this company, so he lives in New York, but also he'd have much more job satisfaction, he'd have more of a stake in the success of a company, and he'd make a lot more money. Steven is doubtful and suspects that the employee is lying. He doesn't believe that he could possibly be a CEO. Steven thinks maybe this employee, he wants to renegotiate his contract, he wants to earn more money, so Steven decides to help him transition out of the company. But it turns out it's true, the employee does have an offer to be CEO, so he takes it, he works in New York, he makes a lot of money, everything is going great. But after 18 months, it all goes wrong for the employee. He ends up getting fired and the company goes out of business and he ends up alone in New York, far away from his friends and family, looking for a job that's at a lower level to the one that he had when he worked with Steven. And Steven makes the point, if only this guy had stayed where he was working with Steven, then his skills would have improved. He would have had much more job satisfaction and he would have had more success. But no, he was greedy. He wanted to be CEO. So look what happens when you don't listen to Steven's advice. This book is full of stories like this one. But anyway, on to the next law. Law 2, to master it, you must create an obligation to teach it. So in other words, if you find yourself unable to explain something to someone just using very simple terms, that means you don't fully understand it yourself. That feels right, and I was nodding along for a page or two, although I should point out, these pages, the text is large and it's doubled spaced, but I was nodding along for a page or two, until I came to Steven's point about having skin in the game. You want to learn more about a specific company, buy a few shares of the stock. You want to learn about Web 3.0, buy an NFT. Putting those first two sentences aside, which are already a bit dubious, you're suggesting people to buy an NFT? This book was released on the 29th of August 2023, but in May 2022, it was revealed that NFT sales had fallen 92% since September 2021. Oof. And despite that being reported in May 2022, more than a year later, this was published in his book. Some of the guests that Steven has on his podcast, Diary of a CEO, they have hints that, they're involved with grift of some kind, that they're trying to push their grift. This kind of example that he gives, it gives me similar vibes. Maybe there's no overt intention for grift, like he's not saying a specific NFT that you should buy, but to me, this sentence, it feels grift adjacent. Law 3. You must never disagree. This law begins with an anecdote of him as a child and his mother and father always arguing. His mother would always follow his father around, just constantly going at him. His father would always try and hide and lock himself in the bedroom, or sometimes he'd get in his car and he would drive away. Steven describes a similar situation with a girlfriend. She would always shout and complain at him, and he would kind of copy his dad's behavior and try to avoid her. Steven makes the point that he's not like his dad. His dad would lock himself in his bedroom. Steven says that he was different because he would lock himself inside his walk-in wardrobe. Because he's rich and he's got a big bedroom, and that big bedroom has a walk-in wardrobe. So instead of his girlfriend yelling from outside the door of the bedroom, she was yelling from outside the door of the walk-in wardrobe. His walk-in wardrobe. Because he was rich and successful. So he has a walk-in wardrobe. At this point, my patience is ebbing away. I don't have much more tolerance for Bartlett just continually talking himself up. He's already mentioned at this point that he's a CEO, but he's also an investor, and he's also on the board of lots of other companies, and he's fundraised millions of pounds. He's an advisor to companies like Uber and Apple, and he's interviewed the world's most successful people. He has a podcast that's got millions of subscribers. He's had some amazing experiences. He's conducted research. Steven, stop it. Stop it, please. You've made the sale. I'm reading the book. Stop talking yourself up. Stop trying to sell. Stop telling me how successful you are. At this point, I'm on page 25 of 333. I've flicked to the back of the book to see how much further I have to go. I've accidentally seen Law 33, so I've actually self-spoiled this book. The arrogance of what I saw there actually took my breath away for a moment, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Anyway, the girlfriend shouting at Steven outside his walk-in wardrobe. His walk-in wardrobe. Because he's rich and successful, so he's got a walk-in wardrobe. Steven points out that because of that, she's now an ex-girlfriend. So this is the second or the third example in the book now that I've come to where someone else was wrong and he was right. I'm already starting to lose track, as well as the will to live. Another early thought after reading 3 laws so far, Steven often gets into this habit of just trying to break everything down into these simple formulas. If you just follow these steps, if you fill these buckets, if you just have this mindset, then everything's going to work out and you'll be successful. Which brings me to this quote. Prioritize filling these first 2 buckets and your foundations will have the long-term sustainability you need to prevail. regardless of how life's tectonic plates move and shake beneath you. Steven has decided that the first two buckets are what you know and what you can do. So this sounds great, doesn't it? But we don't actually live in a meritocracy. Your environment and often just plain luck will make all the difference sometimes. To give you an example, I did well enough at school to be able to go to university. I was the only one from my friend group that managed to do it. When I was younger, I kind of rationalized it to myself. I thought, you know, I worked hard, I studied hard, I deserved to go to university. Maybe they didn't want it as much as I did. You know, I was very focused on working my part-time job so I could save money, so I could pay, and mum and dad wouldn't need to pay for anything. My friends weren't willing to do that, so that's why I went to university, and that's why they didn't. But looking back, that's not really the whole story. My friends and I were very alike. I'd say all of us were pretty average, but our environments and our situations were pretty different. One of my friends, actually my best friend, he lived in a big detached house. He was finding GCSE maths a little bit difficult, so his parents paid for him to get lessons with a private tutor every week. On results day, he was really pleased because he had managed to get a B at GCSE level at maths. Both of us ended up going to sixth form together to do our A-levels. My aim was to go off to university, but his aim was to get into work. So that's what he did after he got his A-levels. Of all my friends, he actually makes the most money. Another friend of mine who sat next to me in most classes, he always managed to do just a little bit better than me. Every piece of coursework, every time we got homework, it was infuriating. I'd be so happy to find out that I got 92% on a piece of coursework, to find out that he got 96%. Even today, I imagine if I got COVID-19, will he get COVID-24? When it came to GCSEs, getting his grades for GCSE maths, like my best friend, he got a B. It turns out his parents were not happy at all. He had two older brothers and his parents didn't really care about how they did at school. So for my friend, they just constantly pushed him. They were determined that they were going to have one child that did well at school. So they were not happy at all that he got a B in maths. He also went to sixth form with me, but very quickly he dropped out because his parents stopped pushing him and he preferred his job working at a pub. Another friend of mine lived with his mum and his younger brothers in a council house. His mother was disabled, and as his father had already left, he ended up being her carer. He was also responsible for taking care of his younger brothers. So he had to take on a lot of responsibility at a young age. There were days when he didn't come to school. Very often he didn't do his homework. And when it came to results day for our GCSEs, he ended up getting a U for most of his subjects, which at the time was the lowest grade that you could get. His highest grade, it turns out, was maths. He got an E. And then there's me. I was an only child. Mum and dad, they weren't well off, but they did own their own home. After school every day, I'd come home, I'd go and do my paper round, and then I'd come back to a quiet house and I'd do my homework or I'd do my coursework. I realise now, looking back, my friend that was caring for his mum, he didn't have a quiet environment. He didn't have this luxury. When it was results day for GCSEs, I did pretty well, but in maths, I got a B. So all of us were pretty average, you know, but our situations were very, very different. Lucky for me that that was my situation. So it's really frustrating for me to read Steven just trying to break things down like this. You know, you'd follow this formula and just, you'll have success always. It doesn't matter who you are. Just follow the laws and you'll find success. Mate, society, life, it's not like that. Barry's economics hits the nail on the head with his critique. A whole 5 months before I've got here. Law 4. You do not get to choose what you believe. Actually, I think I'm going to stop there for my own sanity. This book isn't making me more successful. It's making me more annoyed. This book needs to go back on my bookshelf next to the Da Vinci Code or something. If you want to read something that's going to make you more successful, that will actually work, read this. Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. He wasn't just the guy that Joaquin Phoenix hugged to death at the beginning of the film Gladiator. He wrote one of the most important books ever written almost 2,000 years ago. So if you're looking for self-improvement, read this. Please don't read this. If you're still with me, I'm sorry, I couldn't do it. I couldn't read all 33 laws. Okay, actually 32 laws, because it turns out that Law 33 is just a QR code. Apparently, it just links to a website that's got the whole of the 33rd law. I suspect that if I scan the QR code, if I visit the website, it's going to lead me to some kind of newsletter that I have to sign up for, or some kind of course that I can pay £15,000 for, or maybe it will just redirect me to his YouTube channel and just a massive playlist with all his videos. The conclusion I've come to after reading some of this book is that Steven Bartlett wants you to fail. The more I think about it, the more I think about this book, just the more insidious it becomes in my mind. This book wants you to turn your attention inwards at yourself, at your own flaws, and not at the flaws we have in our society. In my eyes, this book wants you to blame yourself when you're not successful. It's your fault. You didn't fill your 5 buckets enough. It's your fault. You didn't lean in to bizarre behavior. It's your fault. You didn't ask who and not how. If you believe that it's your own fault, then you focus on yourself. Then you need more self-help. You need to watch his podcasts. You need to eat his nutritionally complete gruel. You need to visit his website and join his mailing list and pay for these talks that he gives all over the country. When the reality is, it's not your fault. You don't live in a meritocracy. You were born too late, at a time when older generations now own all the assets and their prices now are just unprecedented. You were born at a time when it's no longer affordable for a lot of people to go to university. You were born at a time when social media is everywhere and there's no escape from influencers that want you to feel bad about yourself, where toxic content is in your face and you're told to blame women or foreigners and not the real people that are causing so much harm to society. Okay, deep breath. My friend thinks that I should keep reading and then I should make a YouTube short of 1 minute for each of the laws in the book. Apparently this is similar to something that Steven did on Twitter. I haven't decided yet. It might take some time for me to build my tolerance back up to his nonsense. And I only read 3 chapters. Anyway, let me know what you think. Should I do it? Have I been unfair to Steven Bartlett? Let me know in the comments below. And if you're not familiar with him yet, follow Barry's Economics. All right, I'll see you next time.